bad in the film.
Ultimately, Miyahama switches parts with Akiko Wakabayashi, and Akiko suggests her new character not be called Suki, but Aki. The film's signature gadget is found by Ken Adam.
I was listening one morning while shaving to Jack DeManio's radio program, and he had this Wing Commander Wallace talking about his gyrocopter. I rang up the BBC and they put me in touch with Wallace.
At the end of the interview, he said, "Would you like to have a fight with a helicopter with one of them, Ken?" And I said, "Give me half a chance."
And he brought his gyrocopter to Pinewood Studios to demonstrate it.
When I landed, Cubby Broccoli said, "Yes," he said, "we shall want it in Japan in 6 weeks' time."
The Boy Scout and me immediately redesigned it as a war machine.
And of course that was popped into the script straight away.
Production begins on July the 4th, 1966, with the death of 007.
This we thought would be interesting to kill off Sean in the first few minutes, which would be very mysterious.
I knew Sean before because we had some mutual friends.
Why do Chinese girls taste different from all other girls?
You think we better, huh?
I wasn't particularly worried about, being in bed with him. Who would?
Maybe offer you a glass of champagne, Mr. Fisher?
And it was my first shooting day, and I remember very well it was nearly my last one.
Are you really sure you won't change your mind?
Well, if you insist.
The cameraman said, "I have to do another correction, come out." So I went out, and as soon as I left that bar, a big, big light cracked down directly in the middle of that bar. So I would have been crushed. I really would have been crushed.
Other dangers are far more calculated. Stunt coordinator Bob Simmons and champion wrestler Peter Fanine Mavia stage a brutal fight. Each move is carefully choreographed.
In my experience, my 52 years experience in films, I found that stuntmen are the most professional people in the world. I mean, their life depends on it.
Don't worry about the pool of blood, because there he is lying there dead.
Each stunt in the fight is discussed in detail. The end result? Smashing. At the end of July, the unit moves to Japan. En route, Sean Connery makes a startling announcement.
I can remember saying to Sean, "Look, Sean, it's silly not to keep on playing Bond, because whilst you're playing Bond, you can do anything in the world that you want to do."
Nonetheless, Sean and the producers find themselves unable to come to terms on a contract for future Bond projects. Some in the press speculate that this will mark the death of James Bond. Upon arrival in Japan, Connery is swarmed by reporters.
Well, the first day, the first morning, there were hundreds of these people.
Now, he's here, and he has not been given the privilege and respect of Japan for a certain amount of privacy.
We had to hire in a special force of security guards to protect the set and to protect him.
He hasn't even had his lunch right now. He had to go back up to his room because he didn't have the privacy of having a little lunch.
On July the 31st, the crew moves to the remote village of Akime. The key crew members are flown in by helicopter, as the location is a 3-hour drive from the nearest hotel. The crush of fans and press trying to get photos of Connery force local police to set up checkpoints on all roads.
I think he's tried beyond normal limits. I mean, everywhere you go, you can't be by yourself at all, really.
The press find ways around the police blockade, much to the distress of the crew. With daily temperatures over 100 degrees, pressures mount on location.
I must insist that you don't say anything until I give you instructions.
Tell him to go into the cave.
But producer Cubby Broccoli works to make the crew as comfortable as possible.
If the picture is not going to be good, then I'm afraid it's not really going to be the fault of the producers in this sense. If I said today, look, I want 5,000 people flown in from Tokyo, I'm sure they'd be flown in, you know.
When some of the actresses are unable to swim in the strong ocean currents, Sean Connery's wife, Diane Cilento, dives in.
Diane, who was a very athletic kind of girl, "Oh, don't worry," she said, I'll double for them. And of course she doubled for about 5 of them, jumping in and out of the water and swimming around, and she really saved the day.
The most dangerous filming takes place above the volcanoes, some of which remain very active.
When I was making the film, I couldn't enjoy myself very much. It was all rather too serious. And a lot of the takeoffs and landings were on most hair-raising places.
He took off on a road, just an ordinary road.
It was a cliff-edge road that actually turned. On one side was a Japanese cemetery with a big gully before you got to it. The other was about a 100-foot drop down into the sea.
So I said to him, would you take off in the opposite direction? Oh, he said, that would be very difficult. I said, well, it's the only way we're going to get the shot.
And you had to approach through a sort of ravine, but it was the only place I could use.
I thought, my God, he's never going to make this. This poor chap's going to be crushed.
Then someone would come along and say, number 2 camera had a hair in the gate. Got to do it again. Every time you took off on a place like that, you think this could be one too many.
Suddenly you saw this thing slowly lifted to the air, and everybody heaved a great sigh of relief.
Sometimes you would land and just slither to a stop on a cliff edge and think, I've still got little Nellie.
He would do all sorts of things that not many pilots would do in this crazy little plane.
I did 85 takeoffs and landings for 46 hours in the air for about 7.5 minutes on the screen.
The filming proves risky, not just to the pilots, but to one cameraman in particular.
Johnny Jordan was the aerial cameraman, and he had to film the aerial battle between the 4 helicopters and the gyrocopter.
He'd made quite a niche for himself in aerial photography. He loved that, and he was quite brilliant at it.
At 6,000 feet, when I was doing a shot going straight towards the camera helicopter, and once or twice I was rather closer to the camera helicopter than my intention had been. And I'd been flying long enough to realise that it was the altitude that was having an effect.
For cameraman Johnny Jordan, the shifting air currents would have devastating consequences.
Another helicopter was supposed to go underneath him, and there was an updraft of air.
And his rotor blade sliced through the skid.
And the propeller went right through his foot.
He was quite seriously injured.
Typical of a cameraman, he immediately panned down to see his leg hanging off.
The Spectre helicopter crashed on the mountainside, and this saved the pilot. He didn't get injured at all.
But the helicopter with Johnny Jordan, now damaged, must make an emergency landing. At the controls, none other than the ex-kamikaze pilot who helped scout locations.
He did a magnificent job in getting the aircraft down without rolling over, because the skid on one side had been cut away, and they managed to get some blocks of stone, and it must have been a help to John to get him out in time.
There was a convention of surgeons very close to where this accident happened, and he was rushed to this theater, and they operated on him.
And they thought they could put the foot back, which they did do.
Immediately, filmmakers cancel shooting of the helicopter battle. Soon, Johnny Jordan is flown back to London. On location, filming continues with other innovative action scenes.
Well, there was one scene where the heavies were riding along, and they didn't know how to get rid of them. And I said, why don't you have a plane with a magnet and have it fly over, attach to the car, pick it up.
Well, that's an absolutely crazy idea, that a magnet can lift a car. But that was it. And then it built from that. Well, OK, what happens here? Oh, it's a helicopter does it, and what's going to happen? Oh, we dump it in the middle of Tokyo Bay. So the thing always developed from that.
For a major fight sequence, Lewis Gilbert takes a different approach.
Fight scenes are always fairly close. And when I saw Kobe Docks and the rooftops, I suddenly got an idea that it would be a very interesting shot to fly over the rooftops with a running kind of battle.
Filmmakers take over the recently restored Himeji Castle as a ninja training school and gather a crowd of 8,000 for a grand champion sumo match.
They will not do it unless it's real. You can't do like all in wrestling and just shout, fall now. They have to do it for real.
And all those wonderful crowd sounds were used, were original soundtracks. The actual fall